everyone. So these are the instructions for podcast 6. In this podcast, we are putting all the pieces together so that in the next podcast, you can put together a full, complete, step-by-step draft of your podcast, like complete podcast. And then after podcast 7, I will give you some revisions and you'll have the chance to resubmit in podcast step 8, which is the last one, and we'll be all done. So first, I'm going to provide you with some information about the final steps to help you plan for the future. I just thought of one more. Okay. So in podcast 7 and 8, you will need a minimum of 8 sources. That is the bare minimum, no fewer than at least 8 sources. You will probably need more. I strongly encourage you to always have more evidence. More evidence is always better. You might need some extra statistics to establish that the problem you're talking about actually exists. You might need, you want to include some more primary sources, right? But you need at least 8. And of those 8, I would like for 6 to be peer-reviewed articles or scholarly books to support your claims, okay? If you have any concerns about that based on your specific topic, come talk to me. There is some flexibility, again, depending on your topic. But in general, most of the topics that I've seen this semester, I think 6 peer-reviewed scholarly articles, peer-reviewed articles, or scholarly books is appropriate. Your podcast, recorded podcast, will be 10 to 12 minutes in length. You will record the podcast. You will submit an abstract. That's just a short summary, okay? You will be required to submit a full transcript of your podcast. That is a word-for-word script that will also include in-text citations for where your sources are. This transcript is necessary because it helps me grade and provide feedback. It's a lot easier for me to comment on the transcript, like, oh, this is good supporting evidence, but I think maybe you might also want to look at this, or, hey, I know of this source, here it is. Or maybe give you organizational feedback. Whatever it is, it's a lot easier to provide that feedback on the transcript than on the recording alone. But you will submit both pieces, transcript and recording. You will have a full APA bibliography for every single source, and only the sources referenced in the podcast. So if it's not a source that is cited somewhere in the transcript itself that you talk about and reference in the recording, then it should not be in the bibliography, because otherwise it didn't inform your transcript, your podcast, or it did and you didn't credit it, didn't cite it, and that's plagiarism, and we don't really want that. So only sources that are cited in the transcript and in the audio should be included in the bibliography. Also, there is a sample podcast transcript posted on Moodle. So you don't need to do anything about these for podcast 6. This is just for your future reference so that you have that information somewhere before we jump into podcast 7. For podcast 6, we're going to make sure we have strong claims, right? Strong arguable claims. So the first question is, what is the story of your arguable claim? What is the story or arguable claim about education, schooling, youths that you are investigating? Make sure that whatever you answer is in fact a claim. Make sure it's not a question in disguise. Make sure it's not a topic. Go back and look at that claims activity that we did in class and make sure you are actually writing a strong, specific, arguable claim, okay? What I'm seeing in podcast 5 is really good, so I would work from there, okay? 2, what is the counter argument to your claim? And who perpetuates or reproduces these types of counter arguments? So we're thinking here when you are making an arguable claim, you as the author have to anticipate what the counter arguments will be, right? We talked about this in the claims activity. So here I'm explicitly asking you to anticipate what and who would make a counter argument. What would that counter argument make? What would that counter argument be? And who would make it? That's an important step for creating a strong argument. 3, provide 3 APA-cited peer-reviewed articles that will inform the historical background of your problem. So, like I said, you will need a minimum of 6 peer-reviewed articles or scholarly books, chapters from books, and your final products. So, and of those, you want to make sure that you're establishing the history of the problem, right? So the achievement gap, for example, didn't just happen one day. It was created, first of all, it was socially engineered through a series of policies over time that affected people's access to education and created stratification across social economic groups. It was constructed over time. It didn't just happen one day. So you want to provide a little bit of that background of whatever your problem is for your readers. So I want 3 sources that will provide that background. We'll provide a full APA citation, bibliographic citation, and I want you to summarize what historical information you will cite. Summarize what historical informations you will cite in your podcast. Okay, so what is it specifically that you're drawing from that source that you think you need to include in your podcast? That's what I want to know. I don't want a summary of the source itself. I want to know what exactly you are going to reference from that source in your final podcast script, okay? Let me know if you have any questions about that. Now, when I say a bibliographic citation, this is what I mean. I've provided some sample templates. For a journal article, you need the author, okay? If you only have one author, cool, delete the others on here. I need the year, right? The audience needs the year of the publication. They need the title of the article. Then the audience needs the title of the journal. It's called periodical here. That means journal. The volume number and issue number, pages, and then you can include a hyperlink. If you just give me a hyperlink, that is not an APA citation at all. That's not providing enough information. It is insufficient, okay? I need author, year, title of the article, title of the journal, volume number, issue number, okay? For a book or a chapter from a book, it's going to be very similar. Again, authors of the chapter. I'm guessing most of you are going to use chapters rather than like you read the whole entire book. Title of the chapter. There may or may not be editors. I'm less worried about that. Title of the book that the chapter is in, and the page numbers. Like if you're an audience member and you want to know what exactly this source was about, that's the information the audience needs in order to go find the book, right? And find the chapter. And now it's your turn, okay? So the citation, and tell me what exactly you are going to draw from those sources to explain the historical background of the problem to your audience, okay? For question 4, you will analyze the claim using the philosophical perspectives of Du Bois. What would Du Bois say, right? Du Bois died in what, the 1950s? So he probably didn't have any essay specifically on the achievement gap, right? Because he was worried about desegregation. He lived during a time where segregation existed. But we can infer from the things that he did publish what he might say about the achievement gap. Just like I have grandparents who have passed away, so I can ask them what they think of this, that, or the other today, you know, this new technology or politics or whatever. But I know them well enough, or I knew them well enough that I can imagine, oh, grandma would say this, or grandpa would say this, or sometimes I see something, oh, grandma would love that, right? Kind of that same process. From what you've read and learned about Du Bois and learned about him through his essays, his writings, you can infer what he might say about a more contemporary topic, okay? But that means you need to have a strong idea of what his perspectives you're drawing from. Are you going to draw from his ideas of racial hierarchy? Are you going to draw on double consciousness? Are you going to draw on his idea of understanding racial inequities from a methodological perspective as opposed to a biological perspective, right? What are you drawing from? We need to kind of name it and explain how we're going to connect it. So what are you drawing from? What would Du Bois say? How will you connect your claim to Du Bois's philosophical perspective for the audience, right? I'm asking you here, how are you, as the podcaster, as the author, going to explain how Du Bois connects to the topic to your audience, people listening? Okay. That's something you will have to do in podcast 7. So I'm trying to move you towards that step to help you. Again, please include a full APA bibliographic citation. Also, please note that The Color of Mind is a great source. You can absolutely use it. However, it is not written by Du Bois. It is written by Derek Darby and John Rory. The chapter we read, which I think is the introduction, was published in their book called The Color of Mind, Why the Achievement Gap Matters, or Why the Origins of the Achievement Gap Matter for Justice. And in the chapter we read, they connected Du Bois's ideas to the theories that they came up with, their theories of the color of mind and dignitary justice and injustice. They connected his ideas to theirs, but Du Bois did not write that. So you just need to make sure you're crediting that, citing it appropriately, okay? That's something I've noticed a lot in the other podcasts. So how are you going to explain Du Bois's connection to your claim to the audience of your podcast? 5, how does the podcast series School of Colors support or contradict the claim you are investigating? Basically, I just want to make sure that you know how you're going to draw in or connect or use School of Colors. Almost everyone this semester should be able to find something. You can use either season. There's 2 seasons, and you can draw from either season any episode, okay? Don't forget, each episode has a transcript, so you can kind of scroll through pretty quickly and look for keywords. You will cite the episode and the season number, and I want you to identify at least one quote that you will be using in your podcast from the School of Colors, okay? So this is kind of what we're doing instead of doing actual interviews, because that would require a lot of paperwork for human subjects approval and stuff. We don't want to do that. So we're going to use quotes from School of Colors podcasts, okay? So for your citation, School of Colors, give me the season. Is it season 1 or 2? Episode number, and then you can give me the URL. And then here, copy and paste at least one quote from the School of Color podcast below. All right, citation, quote. And then finally, this is just a reflection opportunity. we've gone through this journey, right? You've read a lot of sources. We've talked about Du Bois. You've learned stuff in class. What are your closing thoughts or observations about this broader perspective, the big picture, the big why about your chosen claim, right? What have you learned through this investigation? How did this impact you? Like your understanding of the world. So just a reflection on sort of how you've experienced this journey. Okay. That's really everything. Again, the stuff up here is just for your reference. You don't need to do anything. It's just what to expect for the next two steps. What you're responsible for is answering these questions down here, questions 1 through 6, okay? Please let me or Paige know if you have any questions or concerns, and I will get this posted. Thank you.